Hello, welcome to our second week of Bake Through Lent with Ree. Today we are going to be making pretzels, and later on we're also going to be looking at the story of Jesus going to the temple and how that made him feel. This recipe is slightly different. We're going to be using cups instead of grams, but roughly, if you do need a guide, 1 cup is the equivalent of 250 mils. So if you need a guide, that should help you with that. Okay, so to start, I've got 1.5 cups of lukewarm water, and I'm going to pop that into my big bowl here. In it goes. And to that, I'm going to add 2.5 teaspoons of yeast. Now I've got easy bake yeast, which means it's fast acting yeast, so I don't need to soak it in anything. It can just go in as it is. In it goes. Good. And I'm going to give that a nice stir around and let that slowly dissolve. Oh, it looks really interesting. It smells like bread. My yeast is all dissolved in that water, so now I'm going to add in my sugar and my salt, and that's going to give some really nice flavour to our pretzel. So in here I have got 1 teaspoon of salt and I have got 1 tablespoon of sugar. This recipe will be in the comments below, so you can follow along and bake with me. And that goes. There we go, lovely. We're going to give that a big stir around. Okay, that sugar and salt is all incorporated into my mix. In this bowl I've got my plain flour. I've got about 4 cups in here, but we're just going to start off by using 3 cups worth into our liquid, and we'll mix it together and see if it needs more later on. So I'm going to sieve it into my bowl. So let's see. Just make sure it's full up to the top so you get a proper measurement. Okay, so that's 1 cup. Cut it down, scoop it off. That's 2 cups. And finally a third. Oh, I think we'll put a little bit more in there. Okay, beautiful. And that's 3 cups. I don't know if you can hear, but I've also preheated my oven to 200 degrees, but that will be in the recipe for you, so hopefully you've managed to do that. Let's set that to one side, and I'm going to sieve this lovely flour into my water, yeast, salt and sugar mixture. Give it a good shake. Shake, in it goes. Beautiful. We can set that to one side. Okay, and I'm going to start incorporating it with my spoon, but when it starts to come together, I'm actually going to tip it out and knead it on my surface. So I'll need my flour again because I'll want to flour my surface, but let's give this a good mix in. Oh, I think you'll have to get strong muscles to do this. Okay, now as you can see, my dough has started to come together. It's very sticky, so I know that I will need some more flour on it, but I'm going to tip it out and I'm actually going to do that on the surface. So I'm going to take a nice scoop of flour. I'm going to sprinkle my surface liberally, so that means a lot. There we go. A lot of flour on there because I don't want it sticking. I've got really clean hands. I washed my hands, so make sure that when you do all your baking you wash your hands, but particularly if you're going to knead it, you're going to knead your dough. There we go. And we're going to tip that out onto there. Ooh, wow, look at that. It's very stretchy. This is a great recipe to do with all ages because everyone can get stuck in. There we go, last little bits. You can set that to one side. Scrape off all those bits off your spoon as well. We don't want to lose any of our dough. Okay, I'm going to sprinkle a bit more flour on the top, just so I don't get so sticky right off the bat. Okay, so I've got my dough here. I've got it my surface really nicely floured. And what we're going to do now is we're going to knead the dough. And kneading the dough means we push it down with our hands and then we fold it on top like that. Now this is going to take quite a long time, and we need to keep doing it until it stops being so sticky and it starts making a really nice soft dough. It's going to take between 5 to 8 minutes. So whilst we do it, I'm going to tell you a little story. Jesus visited the temple and he was shocked at what it had become. The outer courtyard was filled with shops, and the shopkeepers were cheating people out of their money. They were overcharging for their goods. Jesus said, "Didn't God say, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all people'? But you have made it a den for robbers." And he turned over the shopkeepers' tables and stopped people from carrying things for sale through the temple. Their goods were flying everywhere. This upset some people so much that they began to think of a way to get rid of Jesus. I wonder how that story makes you feel. I wonder how Jesus felt when he was in the temple. I think maybe his stomach felt all twisted up in knots, like the shape we're going to make our pretzels in a minute. He was in God's house, not somewhere that people should be cheated. God's house should be somewhere where people are loved and respected. Can you think of a time in your life where you felt like things weren't fair? Did you know that the pretzel shape is designed to look like a child crossing their arms in prayer? It was designed by a monk to encourage children to pray. What's your favourite way to pray? Can you cross your arms over your shoulders to look like a pretzel? If you'd like to read more of this story, you can check out Mark 11 verses 15 to 18. I wonder how your dough's looking now. Mine's looking nearly ready. If I poke it, it's bouncing back. That's a really good sign. Sprinkle some more flour. One last knead, I reckon. Okay, so I've got my beautiful dough here. It's nice and springy. If I poke it, it's springing back. It feels nice and soft. And I've put a lot of flour on my chopping board again. And what we're going to do now is we're going to cut our dough into sections. So we cut it in half. And set one half aside. We're going to cut it in half again. And we're going to cut it in half one more time. So you should end up with 8 pieces of dough. You can make them into a ball and just set them to one side. Beautiful. So I've got my 8 pieces of dough in roughly a ball shape, and we don't need a rolling pin for this, but I'm going to roll it out as best I can into a sausage shape. I can pull it, I can give it a bit of a roll. Let's try pulling it a bit as well. I want to make a nice long sausage shape with my dough. There we go, so this is mine. You can see how long it is here. So I've made a rainbow shape with my dough, and I'm going to bring the 2 ends together and I'm going to cross them over, so I've got sort of a knot shape. I'm going to twist those 2 ends together, and then I'm going to bring them up so they get over the top of my dough. Make sure I've got some nice big holes so you can see the shape. And there is my first pretzel, and I'm just going to continue doing that with all the rest of these pieces of dough. Okay, so I have twisted all my pretzel shapes. You can see here, you see those? There we go. It's a bit fiddly, but keep having a go and do the best you can, okay? So the final things that I need to do before we pop them into the oven we need to do an egg wash on our pretzels. So I've got 1 egg here which I have beaten, and I'm going to give it another little mix now. And I'm just going to coat these pretzels in this egg wash, and that's going to give it a really nice golden brown colour. On to my last one. Beautiful egg wash on there. Lovely. And then the final thing we're going to do is we're going to sprinkle just a few little bits of salt on the top, and that just gives it a bit more flavour and some nice crunch. I've got some really coarse rock salt, but if you don't have this, you can use just table salt, but just use a very, very tiny amount. So just a few little pinchy fingers and sprinkle, 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 and do that for each one. And they are ready to go in the oven. So these lovely pretzels are going to go in the oven for about 14 minutes or until they're golden brown. So do keep an eye on them because we don't want them to burn. Here are mine. They've just come out of the oven. They're super, super hot. They've got this beautiful golden brown colour where the egg wash is. One thing that I would say that I didn't do is make sure you take the egg wash right down to the bottom so that it can all get that lovely shiny golden brown. I think they smell delicious, and when they've cooled down, I am looking forward to having those for my lunch. See you next week. Bye!